Hey everybody! In today's video, we're going to build out some data visualizations here in Amazon QuickSight. This is a pretty simple example, but I've got some tasks in a DynamoDB table. Looks like I currently have 11, and we're tracking completion status. I've got 7 that are complete and 4 that are not complete yet. I've also got a breakdown by category over here. You'll see those. And then here, just a table listing all of the tasks. So let's get started. But first, and always very important, let's talk about costs for this. We're going to be using several different services. First will be DynamoDB, our NoSQL database. And if you scroll down, DynamoDB is eligible for the free tier. So if you're still in that window, it's usually the first 12 months you have an account. This should be totally free. If you're not, you'll see the pricing up here. So you're charged for read and write requests, as well as data storage and some other things. For what we're doing, though, your cost should be very, very minimal, maybe 1 or 2 US cents. And then we're also going to be using Athena. And you'll see the pricing here. For SQL queries, $5 per terabyte of data scanned. We're not going to be anywhere near that, so also very inexpensive. For QuickSight, if it's your first time using QuickSight, I'm going to walk you through how to set up a subscription. And with that, you'll get a 30-day free trial. So this should cost you nothing, but otherwise you'll see the cost down here. And then finally, S3, Simple Storage Service. This is also eligible for the free tier. So if you're in that, it should be nothing. Otherwise, it's still very, very inexpensive. And you'll see the costs here. So overall, even if you're outside of the free tier, I would say this whole project will cost you maybe $1 US or less. But be sure to stick around to the end. I'll show you how to delete everything that we set up. And this is super important for QuickSight because you will be charged monthly if you leave it running after that trial period. All right, so with that out of the way, you're going to need an AWS account, obviously. Make sure you're logged in either as the root user or an IAM user with admin privileges. We're going to need that to set up QuickSight. And speaking of QuickSight, you do need a separate account or subscription for this. So just being logged into the AWS console with your AWS account is not going to give you access to QuickSight. But you can start the process from here. So in the AWS console, let's search for QuickSight. And if you already have a QuickSight subscription, you'll get to a page that looks like this. But if not, you're going to get a very different experience. I grabbed some screenshots of that for those of you who have not set up your account yet. You'll be prompted to sign up for a QuickSight account. So just click that button and then basically follow the wizard. You'll need to enter an email for notifications and then choose your authentication method. If you're just using standard IAM credentials, then choose the top one here. There's also support for Identity Center and other ways to log in. I personally have not tried those, so you're kind of on your own if you choose one of those, but they are supported. You want to select your region. Mine was defaulting to North Virginia, but it can be whatever region you typically work in. And then you'll also need a QuickSight account name. So fill in all of this information. For IAM role, use the Manage Role, that top radio button. And then I just left all of the defaults for allowing access to the different resources. For the optional add-in, make sure you deselect this option here. Otherwise, it's going to be $500 a month, so super important. Then you click Finish. It'll take a minute or so to create your account, and then once you're done, you should get to that QuickSight screen. Okay, so that's the setup process. You should just have a free 30-day trial at this point. And again, make sure you stick around to the end, or I'll show you how to terminate that. Okay. Now that we've got all the things that we need in place, here's what we're building at a very high level. There's going to be a lot of other pieces that kind of get thrown in here as we go along. But at a high level, we're going to grab tasks out of DynamoDB and visualize them in QuickSight. You saw a preview of that as I kicked off the video. But let's just work in baby steps here. We need somewhere to store the tasks. So let's start here with DynamoDB. Back out to the console, go to DynamoDB. If you need the basics about this database, feel free to check out the video linked above and below. And I want to start by creating a new table, which you can do right over here. I'm going to call mine My Tasks Table, and I actually already have one. So I'm going to add a 2 onto the end of mine just so I can keep track of everything. For the partition key, this is our primary key for how we uniquely identify each task in the table. That's going to be task ID. It'll be a string. And then the sort key, if you want to group tasks by category or some other logical grouping, you would use this. It is optional, but I'm going to use category. For what we're doing, this will also be a string. Okay, we can leave defaults for everything else, scroll down, and create the table. Okay, after that completes, just click into the table. And if you go to Explore Table Items, we have an empty table, obviously, since we haven't created anything. So let's go ahead and manually create some items. At some point, you might want to build a UI to enter these items. We're just going to do it on the back end using some JSON code. So create item. You do have to do these one at a time. If you use the CLI or write some code, you can do a bulk load, but we're going to do this manually. You could enter them here. I do have some JSON code, though, that'll make this a little bit easier for us. So out here in GitHub, I will put the link to this repository down in the description of the video. I've got DynamoDB items in JSON right here. So just open up this file. There are 10 tasks in here, starting with an ID of 1, 2, 3, and so on. So you'll need to grab these one at a time. Just grab the JSON code, come back here, go to JSON view, and then just replace all of the code that it gives you. This is our first task. So S stands for string. That's going to be a 1. All of these are strings. This is a Boolean, whether the task is completed or not. So true or false. The others are strings in this date format. So that's it. Just create the item. And then we'll do the same thing for the other items. You don't have to create all 10 if you want, or obviously you can create additional items or different items if you want to change the name or anything else. So JSON view. Enter task number 2. I will finish this for all 10 tasks, pause the video, and be back when I'm done. Okay, I've entered all 10 tasks here, looking good. So we can check this one off of our list. Now, ultimately, we want to be able to visualize this data in QuickSight. So let's go out to QuickSight and see what we can do there. Out here on the main page for QuickSight, just come into Datasets. And you might be tempted to just create a new data set that hooks up to DynamoDB. But if you look through the list here of possible options, you will not find DynamoDB. You'll see things like Redshift, RDS, MySQL, SQL Server, even S3. So in theory, we could export our data from DynamoDB to S3, but that would be an extra step. You'll also see that Athena is supported here. If you need more on the basics of Athena, then check out the video above and below. But you might know that Athena is used to query data sources using SQL queries, but we're using a NoSQL database with DynamoDB. So what do we do? How can we visualize DynamoDB data using QuickSight? That seems like a pretty common thing to need to do, right? So we are going to use Athena, but Athena cannot connect directly to DynamoDB. So we wouldn't be able to get the data right out of the table that way. Instead, what we need to do is use a connector between the two. And this is the Athena DynamoDB Connector, but it also involves Lambda. Now, luckily, you don't have to worry about that Lambda part at all. You don't need to write any custom code here. There's a pre-built Lambda function that basically translates the SQL queries from Athena into DynamoDB API calls. Because remember, DynamoDB is a NoSQL database, so the standard SQL queries that you write in Athena are not going to work directly with DynamoDB. So this connector is kind of the magic that makes all of this work. There's also an AWS Glue part that kind of happens behind the scenes. This grabs supplemental metadata from the DynamoDB table. So things like the table format, the schema, associated properties. So let's work on this part next. Back in the console, I'll open up a new tab, and we'll go to Athena. Then expand the menu over here and come down to Data Sources and Catalogs, and create data source. Okay, now here you'll see that we do have DynamoDB as an option, so that's a good thing. With that selected, scroll down and say Next. For data source name, I'm going to call it My DynamoDB. Here's the AWS Glue part that I mentioned. This all just kind of happens automatically for you. It's going to default to a name here. I'll leave that as it is, but we do need to specify a spill location. So what is this? Well, Lambda has a maximum response size of 6 megabytes. So if your Athena query retrieves a whole bunch of data from DynamoDB, maybe you've got millions of items, it could exceed that limit. Now, that's not going to happen in our case because this is super simple and we don't have that many tasks, but just FYI for future, this is why you need it. So if you've got too much data that comes back, the Lambda function needs somewhere to store that extra data, and that's this S3 bucket that we specify as the spill location. Athena can then read the spilled data from S3 and return a complete query result. So that means we need an S3 bucket. That's easy to create, so I'll just open up a new tab. We'll go to S3, quickly create that bucket, and then we'll select it back here. S3, and create bucket. I'm going to call mine Athena Spill Location, TTT for Tiny Technical Tutorials. This does have to be globally unique, so you'll need to choose something different than what I have here. Just remember what you called it. You can leave all the defaults for everything else, scroll down, and create the bucket. All right, now back to Athena. We need to select that bucket we just created, so we'll browse S3. Here's my new bucket. I will choose that. We can leave defaults for everything else. Scroll down, make sure you acknowledge that Athena will create resources in your account, and say Create Data Source. This might take a minute. I will let it run and be back when it's done. Okay, it looks like that completed. Now let's just test that we can query our data in DynamoDB from Athena. To do that, we'll come into the query editor over here. The data source, so the one that we just created, was My DynamoDB. If you named yours something else, it should be there. Here is my table. So this is my DynamoDB table that I'm able to query from Athena, even though Athena uses SQL queries and DynamoDB is NoSQL. So yay! Okay, let's just do a simple query here. I'll do a select star from, and then whatever you named your table. So mine is My Tasks Table 2. Incidentally, if this is the first time you're using Athena, you might get a message at the top, something to the effect of you need a place to store your query results. So the query results will return down here, but they do also get saved to an S3 bucket. I can't remember if that message on the top will give you a way to configure that, but you can just come into Settings, and in here is where you'll configure that. So you'll see that I've got a query result location here. This is just an S3 bucket, similar to how we created one for the spill location. So you'll need to manage, come in here and select whatever the S3 bucket is that you created, but then you should be good to go. That message should go away and your queries should work no problem. So back to my query editor, let's just run this one. And here are all my tasks. Excellent. Okay, so the middle piece is working. Now let's focus on the QuickSight part. Now, if we just go into QuickSight and connect up to Athena, which we can now do, you'll think that everything will just work from here on out, but it actually won't. So I'm going to save us the pain and just tell you first that we need to update some permissions. Remember that the data connector works by invoking a Lambda function to query data from the DynamoDB table. Now that we're going to be working in QuickSight, that means QuickSight will actually need permissions to invoke the Lambda function. Also, remember we've got this S3 bucket for the spill location, so QuickSight needs access to that as well. So we need to set up the appropriate permissions for all of this to work before we actually head into QuickSight and try to do anything. Okay, back to the console. I'm going to open up a new tab, and this time we're going to go to IAM, Identity and Access Management. Link above and below if you need the basics to that. I've already been here in my recently visited, so I'll just go to IAM. And then over here on the left, roles. You want to search for a role that has QuickSight in the name. It'll probably be named this. You should have it by default, assuming that you're using QuickSight. So just click into that. And then we need to add some permissions. We need one to invoke the Lambda function, and then one to access the S3 bucket. To add those, just come over here to Add Permissions, and we're going to create an inline policy and toggle over to the JSON editor. Now, I've also added these policies to the GitHub repo, so you don't have to type them out from scratch. But if we come back here, come into the IAM policies file, and there are two. So this is the one to invoke the Lambda function right here. Now, really important, you need to update your region and your account number. I'll show you where to get these. Let me just copy this, though. Back to IAM, I'll just copy and paste all of this in here. Basically, you need to get the Amazon resource name, the ARN, for the Lambda function. Remember, this Lambda function was created for you automatically, so you might not even know that it's there. But if we go look at Lambda, so opening a new tab here, I'll go into Lambda. For me, this was the Lambda function created 9 minutes ago, so let's just click into that one. If you chose a different name for your connector, something other than this, yours will be named something different. So best that you just come in here and grab the full ARN. So you can get that right here. Just copy this to your clipboard. That should have your region as well as your AWS account number, the function name. So copy that to your clipboard. Come back here to IAM and just replace all of this, starting with ARN all the way to the last quote. There we go. And everything else you should be able to just leave as it is. So this is saying we want to allow QuickSight to invoke this particular Lambda function. Scroll down, click Next. We do need to give the policy a name. I'm going to call mine QuickSight invoke Lambda and create policy. We need to do those steps again for the S3 bucket. So add permissions, create inline policy, switch over to JSON again, and then back to the GitHub repo. This one right here is what you want. So I'll grab that, replace all of the code. So here we're saying we want to allow list bucket, which will get the actual bucket, and then get object will grab all the stuff inside. But we do need to update the bucket name here to whatever your bucket name is. So for me, this was Athena spill location, TTT. And then the second statement will be the same bucket name, but then you've got that /*, which means all of the items in this bucket. So you'll need both of these. Make sure you fill in the bucket name there with whatever you called yours. Scroll down, say Next. This one I'm going to call QuickSight S3 spill and create policy. Okay, so now that we have the permissions piece set up, let's go into QuickSight and connect things. I have that tab open here. So I'll just back up to the home page, clicking on that logo. Then over on the left, come to Datasets and New Dataset, connecting to Athena. So all that setup work that we did before is so that we can actually use Athena as a data source here in QuickSight. For data source name, I'm going to say Athena tasks. I'm going to add a 2 at the end of mine. You can leave all the defaults and everything else and create data source. Now this top drop-down will default to the AWS data catalog. This is the AWS Glue catalog, but we want my DynamoDB. This was the Lambda connector, so make sure you toggle that. Database is default, and then the actual table that has all of our tasks in it. For me, that was my task table 2. Yours might be called something else, but select that and say Select. Now we need to choose if we want to import to Spice for quicker analytics or query the data directly. If you go with the Spice option, this will actually cache your data, so your queries will be faster. If we directly query the data, there's no caching, but that means that new items or deleted items will be reflected right away. Since we don't have a ton of data, I'm not too worried about caching and performance, but I do want to add an item at the end of the demo and just show you that it appears here. So I'm going to directly query the data and then say visualize. Okay, let's create an interactive sheet. This is where we'll add our data visualizations and say create. And assuming that everything worked correctly, we should have all of our different attributes over here for the data. And of course, these are coming from DynamoDB through Athena, through our connector. Okay, let's create some data visualizations. I'll click on the auto graph here, and then up here, click on visualize. That should open up a new pane for you here. If you've used other tools like Power BI or Tableau in the past, other BI tools, you'll find that QuickSight is pretty similar. I'm not going to deep dive on any particular data visualization. This video is really just meant to show you how to get everything working together. But let's start with a chart to show task completion status. And I want to go with a donut chart, this one right here. So just click on that. And then we basically want to drag and drop things over here to the different items right here. So for this one, let's grab completion status, just mouse on it, pick it up, and drop it here in the group. Now, when you drop it, make sure you see that little add label under it. Otherwise, it doesn't really add. So drop it when you see that. And then we're going to grab task ID, drag that over to value, make sure you see the add. And there we go. So we've got the basic chart. You can edit all kinds of different things on the chart. So if you just click on it, make sure it's selected. Over here under properties, there's a lot you can do. I'll just update a few things here. So we've got the display settings. I'll edit the title. So rather than count of task ID by completion status, let's call this task completion status and save. The colors that are being used here, the blues, if you just click on one of these, you can change them. So let's say for task completion status is 0, that means it's not completed. That's a false. So let's make that a red. And then for this one here, if you just click on it, color 1 means it is completed. So let's do a green for that, just to make it easier to see. Down here, you can turn off the data labels. That's going to be these right here, the 1 and the 0. So we can just toggle those off. But like I said, there's a lot more that you can do here, kind of explore the different properties available and get your chart just the way you want it. And incidentally, if you find yourself with lots of tasks that aren't being completed or aren't being completed fast enough in real life, then I would recommend heading out to Skillshare, the sponsor of today's video. Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creatives. They've got thousands of classes led by industry experts across film, illustration, design, freelance, productivity, and more. Skillshare can help you take your career, skills, hobbies, passions, or side hustles to the next level. As you're working through your daily task list for work items or personal things, health items, whatever else, there are all kinds of classes here that might come in handy. Maybe you start with the productivity classes. Learn some new tools and strategies for getting more done. AI tools, tools to manage tasks, better ways to study. Or kind of related, we've got personal development. This category has lots of great classes around goals, mindset, and generally life improvement things to make you do whatever you do just a little bit better. For productivity, I've been working through this class with Ali. You might recognize him from his giant YouTube channel or podcasts or books about productivity and living a more fulfilled life. He's also a doctor who still teaches at Cambridge University, so I would say he's an insanely productive person who's very qualified to talk on the topic of productivity. His class is packed full of practical tips and things that you can start doing today. He also dispels a lot of myths that we have about how much time we have, about motivation, and that productivity has to be all about work, when actually productivity includes having fun as well. Finally, I would recommend checking out Skillshare's Learning Paths. These are curated sequential class collections to master a specific skill, and they're really a great way to start when you don't know where to start. The first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare, so get started today. Okay, back to our tasks in real life that we've been working with here in QuickSight. Let's add another visualization. For this one, I want to see the distribution of tasks by category. So we'll come up to Add Another Visual. For this one, let's do a horizontal bar chart. I like this one right here, so just select that. For the y-axis here, let's use category. So I'll pick up this field here, drag it over, drop it here. And you'll see all the categories that I have in my tasks. Let's also pick up task ID over here. We'll drag that to value. And this should automatically default to count. But there are different ways that you can aggregate things, maybe count distinct, but we'll go with the default there. Let's update the title. So rather than count of task ID by category, over here under display settings, I'll edit title. This one will be tasks by category. And save. And now let's rearrange things a little bit on the sheet here. I'll close out of this panel just to give us more space. And you'll see that for everything here, you can resize just by dragging that corner. Resize this one. And then you can also just drag and drop things. So make sure your cursor changes to this arrow. We can drag things around the page. Let's place this one under the other one. Here we go. Just pick it up. Drag it, you'll see you kind of get some placeholders with this dashed line. I'll select this one, resize it, something like that, however you want to get things laid out. But let's add a third and final visualization, the table that lists all of our tasks. So up here, we'll click on the Visualize button again to get that pane, add, and this one's just going to be a table right here. Let's add task name. So just pick this one up. I'm going to drop this here on group by. And you'll see that as I'm dropping that, new dimensions will be added. These are basically the columns. So there it is, task name. Let's do created date. Pick that up, drag it over. And we'll also do category and completion status. So category, completion status. And that should give us 4 columns. Now let's say we want to sort by created date. To do that, I can just click on the ellipse here, sort by created date. Looks like that is already the default. Okay, you can also resize columns just by dragging them directly here on the visualization. And we can even resize this just like we did with the other ones. Let's make that take up the same vertical space. So something like that, closing out of this. And we'll update the name of this one, the title, to be task list. And save. Okay, now just to show that everything is connected and that we're directly querying the data from DynamoDB, let's go add a new item in DynamoDB and see that it's reflected here. So right now I've got 10 tasks, as you'll see. We've got the list over here. So let me switch over to DynamoDB. We will add a new item. So create item. Over to the JSON view. And I'll just grab the JSON that we were using earlier out of the GitHub repo. I'll just grab the top task here. Copy that. Paste it here. And I'll make the task ID 11, and task name, I'll just call this new task. Okay. Create item. Now back to QuickSight. You won't see it reflected here right away. The data gets refreshed every time you open this analysis. So this page that we're on, this is called an analysis. So we actually need to close out of it and reopen. I'll just back up to the top level of QuickSight here. My task table 2 analysis. This is what I was just on. And now the data is refreshing. You'll see the indicators there. And I've got 11 tasks. The new task is showing up here. Excellent. So everything is working. Now, if you wanted to share this with other people, you would need to publish it which I'm not going to do here, but there is a lot more that you can do in QuickSight. Hopefully this gives you an overview, though, of what's possible and how you can work with different data sources. Okay, here is everything that we built. Nice work. This actually seems like a pretty simple application when you're just in QuickSight, but as you can see now, there are lots of moving parts here, and getting them to all talk to each other is a pretty big accomplishment. So, awesome job. Now, there's obviously a lot more you could do here. You could add a proper UI instead of manually creating tasks in the database. Feel free to continue doing that. But I do want to show you how to delete everything that we spun up, just so you don't end up with any surprise bills. So very important that you go through this piece. Let's start by coming into Athena and expanding the left nav over here. Come into Data Sources and Catalogs. And let's delete this My DynamoDB data source or connector. So just select it, say delete. But let's confirm. Delete. Now remember, there is the Lambda function behind that connector, so let's just make sure that that got deleted. Back to functions here. I'm on my list of all functions. It looks like that got deleted, so we're good to go there. Next, let's go to S3. So we created that bucket for the spill location. I will just select this and say delete. Now, there are actually not any files in this bucket because we didn't have a giant query that we were running. If there are things in here, though, you'll need to empty the bucket first before you can delete it. But mine is good to go. We'll just delete the bucket. Next, we'll go to DynamoDB. And I will just back up to all of my tables here, make sure I'm getting the right thing. So mine was my tasks table 2. Just select that, say delete. Let's delete all CloudWatch alarms. I don't want to create a backup. We'll say confirm. And delete. We also need to go into Glue. Remember, there was a connection set up there kind of behind the scenes for us. So I'll just come into Glue. Here, I don't have that tab open. This is under Data Connections on the left nav. And this one right here, or yours might be called something else, but just select that. Actions and delete. Delete. And then very important is the QuickSight subscription. So this is the one that's going to cost you monthly after your free 30-day trial. So don't skip this one. Coming back to QuickSight, click on your profile picture up here in the top right, or your profile icon. Say Manage QuickSight. Account Settings. Account Termination. Click Manage. Now by default, you probably have account termination protection on, just so things aren't accidentally deleted. So you'll need to turn that off with the toggle here, and then delete the account. So just type in confirm, and delete account. Now you can set up another account or subscription after this. You have to wait about 15 minutes. But if at some point you want to come back and do this, it's fine. This is not like a once and done that you can never use QuickSight again. But this will delete your account so that you don't start getting that monthly bill after your first 30 days. So delete. And we're good to go. Okay, so that does it for this video. If you enjoyed it, give me a thumbs up on the video so YouTube knows it's worth sharing with other people. And also consider subscribing to the channel for more content like this. Thanks so much for watching.